Howdy folks, and welcome to Mingles with Jingles. This is the first in a new series. Technically it's the second. Q&A with the Mighty Jingles was the first. Before we get started, what you're actually seeing here is a single mission. Flying the Catalina. You start off, look at that. It's actually got its undercarriage deployed. And that is what happens. It's got its undercarriage deployed in the water. Retract the undercarriage while you're in the water. It falls off. That's going to cause me problems later on in this mission. But not here to talk about this particular single mission in War Thunder. This is, as I said, the first proper in what's hopefully going to be a continuing Q&A session that I hope to do about once a week. Now, as for the name of this video segment, Mingles with Jingles, one of my subscribers, August Smith, was the first guy to suggest Mingles with Jingles. And while that one comment did not receive more votes than any other comment, numerous other people also suggested Mingles with Jingles, and it always got heavily voted up. I think the single most popular comment was AGC Cannon Fodder suggested Jingle Tells, which, you know, Jingle Tells, Jingle Bells, yeah, I kind of like that one as well. And that one got 148 plus votes, but there were just so many more accumulated votes for Mingles with Jingles that's what we're going to be, Mingles with Jingles. So here we go, first in the series. Now, on with the questions. Start off just by providing generic stock answers to some of the most popular questions that get asked all the time. Jingles, why do you never live stream? Because I'm not good enough, simple as that. I do live stream, however, by riding on the coattails of other people who are a lot better than I am. Popping up on screen right now is my live streaming schedule. I try to mention this as often as possible because there's 48,000 of you subscribers out there, and there's never more than a couple of hundred of you ever turn up for any of these live streams. And yeah, that's fine. You don't have to, but perhaps that's because not all of you are aware that I do them. So World of Tanks, I live stream twice a week. Thursday nights with Quickie Baby, Monday nights with Circumflexes, and Saturday nights War Thunder with Origin and the HB guys. On the subject of the live streaming, by the way, encourage everybody, if you don't do Facebook, then you don't do Facebook, and that's fine. But sometimes there are short-term changes to the schedule and other things that it's just easier to mention on Facebook, where I can just quickly type in a Facebook post rather than having to put a video together, render it, put a commentary on it, upload it. It's just easier to make announcements about stuff short-term on Facebook. So if you want to join me on Facebook, by all means go ahead. If you don't, then you don't, and that's also fine. Link to the Facebook page, Mighty Jingles Facebook page, in the video description below. Getting back to this mission in War Thunder just for a second, what I'm actually doing here is you're flying some secret documents to a forward airbase across the River Volga from Stalingrad. But the German forces have got anti-aircraft guns mounted along the coastline, so you're actually you couldn't do this in anything other than the Catalina or maybe one of the Japanese float planes, but you actually have to spend the majority of this mission cruising along just under takeoff speed below the anti-aircraft guns, i.e. sailing up the River Volga in your airplane. So that's what you're actually watching going on here. Unfortunately, as you saw at the start, because I tried to retract I don't know why the undercarriage was deployed in the first place. I was in the river. But when I tried to retract my undercarriage as I was accelerating forward, it ripped my undercarriage off. I have to land on an airfield at the end of this thing. So that's going to come back and bite me in the arse. Anyway, I'm supposed to be answering questions here. Here we go. Joseph Todd 2001 wanted to know, what's my favourite tank in World of Tanks? Oh boy. I like simple questions, and I really didn't have to think about that one for too long. I might have spent about 7 seconds mulling it over, and seriously, when you absolutely definitely have to kill every single tank on the battlefield, take the ISU 152 with the BL-10 troll cannon, and accept no substitutes. That thing has been the cause of more rage quits from the people I've shot at than any other tank in the game. The thing about the ISU 152 with the BL-10 is it's an absolutely monster of a grind. It's even worse than grinding the VK 3001P, because pretty much the grind for the BL10 on the ISU-152 starts at tier 7 when you unlock the SU-152. That's all the SU-152 is. And another question I keep getting asked is, Jingles, are you ever going to do an SU-152 review? No, never. It's not going to happen. I'm never buying that thing again. I hated it. You know, there are people that can make it work. I made it work, but I didn't enjoy it. For me, the SU-152 at tier 7 was just the start of the grind for the BL10 gun on the ISU-152. And playing the ISU-152 without the BL10 gun is pretty much just exactly the same as playing the SU-152, except now you're a tier higher and you can get into tier 10 games. And imagine taking on tier 10 tanks with the SU-152 and you'll have some sort of idea. I forget off the top of my head how much XP you need for that BL10 gun, but it's something like 60,000. But trust me, trust your Uncle Jingles. When you get that gun, holy shit. I quite happily platooned up with Yag Tigers and Object 704s when I was driving that ISU 152 because it's got the same or a better gun. Putting that gun on a tier 8 tank destroyer is just cruel to it's just vindictive to other tier 8 tanks. That thing has got over 260 millimeters of penetration and it does 750 average damage, and you get to take it into tier 8 games. It's absurdly good fun. I have laughed my ass right off. If ever I'm doing an ISU 152 video and you hear me laugh and then a sort of thudding noise, that's my ass hitting the floor as I laugh it right off. Because that's what happens when you point that gun at a target, pull the trigger, and watch their health just evaporate. I've done over 1,000 damage in a single hit with that thing at tier 8. It's awesome. So, my favourite tank... is it the best tank in the game? Nah, don't know about that. But it's my favourite tank in the game. The ISU 152 is just unbelievable. Prior to patch 7.5, I would have said the Marder 2, but the Marder 2 has been nerfed into uselessness. Unfortunately, the Marder 2 is dead. The ISU 152 is the new king. The next question comes from Random Dude 8626. He wanted to know what rank I was in the Navy and will I do a webcam Q&A. I reached the lofty heights of leading writer. It's kind of like a corporal. I joined up as a radio operator. Did that for 6 years. Wasn't very good at it. Didn't like it at all, and I changed branch to what they call writer in the Navy, which is it's like admin basically, an admin clerk, pay clerk, correspondence, pay, leave, travel, all that sort of thing. Just basically looking after the administration of the sailors. And I loved it. It was an easy life. I just sat in the ship's office, shining a chair with my arse all day, while everybody else is scrubbing the upper deck and getting their hands dirty. So I did that for, oh god, where's my maths gone? 16 years. Loved it. Fantastic job. I definitely recommend to anybody, even if you only do it for the minimum length of service in the Royal Navy. It's 4 years. See the world, get out, meet interesting people, and so on and so on. It was definitely something I would recommend. A lot of people do it just for a few years, just to get out and see a bit of the world, get a bit of life experience, and then they go and do university after that, and then go on to other jobs. But it's an option. Keep your options open. Why the Navy and not the Army or the Air Force? Well, simple answer to that one: the Navy were actually advertising. It's no more complicated than that. Why not the Army? Nothing against the Army, but I just didn't fancy the idea of sleeping in ditches. You're in a clean bed every night, you get laundry, 3 hot meals a day in the Navy. I didn't fancy the idea of being cold and tired and hungry all the time on exercises. Why not the Air Force? I don't know. No, the Air Force is good as well. It's certainly a much easier life than the Navy. But, that's it. That's why the Navy. As for a webcam, I do actually have a webcam. Unfortunately, due to technical difficulties, it's not really practical for me to do a Q&A like this via the webcam, because for reasons that I have yet to figure out. I spent a lot of money buying a really, really expensive microphone. A Rode Podcaster is what it's called. It's a really, really good microphone. I've got a boom arm, a shock mount for it, all the good stuff. But every time I switch the webcam on, it turns off the microphone and it ends up recording via the built-in microphone on the webcam. And the built-in microphone on the webcam is shit. It's really lousy audio quality. So I'm not saying I'm not going to do a webcam Q&A, but until I can figure out how to override the webcam's microphone and use my podcaster microphone, it's not something that's going to happen in the immediate future. Back to this War Thunder mission for the moment. You remember that at the start, because for some bizarre reason the landing gear was actually deployed while it was sitting in the river, and the landing gear got ripped off when I accelerated to takeoff speed. I now have to actually land this thing on an airstrip in order to complete the mission with no landing gear. So this is going to be interesting. This is one of the single missions that you can unlock for... This is kind of weird actually, because there is a Russian Catalina in the game. But it makes... And this is one of the Russian missions that you unlock by advancing in rank in the Russian Air Force in War Thunder, yet it gives you an American Catalina to fly. And I just need to slow down. Slow down. And... Come on, give me mission complete. Yes! Any landing you can walk away from is a good landing. What's coming up now is the reason why I haven't actually put a video up in the last 2 days. This is Star Wars The Old Republic. I have a whole bunch of level 50 characters in this, and they've just released the new expansion, Rise of the Hutt Cartels, and I've been playing this thing non-stop. It's gone free to play. Well, it's been free to play for a while, but the free to play model in this game, when they first released it as free to play, sucked. It was worse than playing with a trial account on other MMOs. So much of the game just wasn't available to non-subscribers. I couldn't recommend it unless you were paying money for this thing. It was just horrible. It's not too bad now. They've changed certain things to do with the free-to-play model. If you, like me, had bought the collector's edition, which cost nearly £100, we've basically got 3 different kinds of play. You've got free-to-play, preferred status, and subscribers. Subscribers get access to everything. Free-to-play gets a very, very limited version of the game. And preferred status is kind of halfway in between the two. If you're thinking of getting into this, I recommend what you do is you buy some of the in-game currency, cartel coins, as a free-to-play customer, and you unlock the stuff that you need to really play the game effectively. Extra action bars, stuff like that, access to flashpoints, blah blah, so on and so on. One-time purchase, spend a little bit of money, and then carry on playing free to play. And it's actually it's fun. I mean, it's not tanks, it's not airplanes, but it's Star Wars. It's good stuff. And I've been enjoying this. But anyway, enough of Star Wars: The Old Republic. Back to the questions. Eat the Chip, good name, wanted to know, have I ever considered approaching Wargaming direct and asking them for support in reviewing certain tanks? Because there's a lot of tanks that people ask for reviews of that is going to take a long time before I ever get round to it. I'm talking about things like the Mouse, the 4502P, because the KV4 as well, because they're end-of-line tanks in lines that I don't already have. So, for example, I bought the Tiger P again, but then I need to do the 4502A, and then the 4502P, and then the Mouse, and I have to grind out the XP for this. So his suggestion was, well, have you considered approaching Wargaming and asking them for a review account, if you like? It's not a bad idea, but Wargaming just don't do that sort of thing. They don't need to. There are more. I'm not the only person doing World of Tanks reviews and gameplay and so on and so on. There are plenty of people out there who have these tanks and who have put videos of them up, and if people want to see, you just need to go onto YouTube and search for World of Tanks Mouse, and you can see Mouse reviews. You won't see me doing them because I don't have them, but Wargaming don't, they're not there to just to cater for my channel, and there's enough people doing the content that I can't show you that they've got no reason to go ahead and do it. So it's a good suggestion, but it's just never going to happen, unfortunately. You're just going to have to wait for me to unlock the things myself, or exercise your democratic right to watch somebody's channel that isn't mine. There's no reason why you can't do both. Next question comes from Oscar van der Ven. I hope I pronounced that right, it sounded Dutch. And he wanted to know, if I was a sailor, what ships have I served on? Well, quite a few actually. My first ship was HMS Brazen. It was a Type 22 frigate, and I joined that straight out of training as a radio operator. Flew out to the Gulf to join the ship in Dubai 3 months before the first Gulf War kicked off, so that was a hell of an experience. 20 years old, first ship, straight into a war zone. However, the Gulf War wasn't really a naval war, and the part of the Gulf that we were in was really, really quiet. Our job was escorting merchantmen through the Straits of Hormuz, and it was pretty boring. It really, really was. There was very, very little excitement. We called ourselves the Combat Fruit and Veg Patrol. That's how important our job was. I mean, it was important, but it wasn't very interesting or exciting. And I don't have a problem with boring wars. I like my wars boring. It's when wars get interesting and exciting, that's when people start getting killed. So, yeah, that was okay. There was one brief moment of random terror during the 6 months we spent out there before the war ended. HMS London, another Type 22 frigate, was the guard ship for the RFA Argus, which was the hospital ship sailing around off the coast of Riyadh. And on one day in particular, HMS London had to go, because it was the flagship of the task force, had to go further up north to, where the fighting was actually going on. And we took over as the guard ship for the Argus, and that was the single day during the entire course of the war that the Iraqi Air Force came out to play. And two, I don't know what they were, MiG-29s perhaps? Su-25, I don't know what they were. Two Iraqi aircraft decided that was the day they wanted to sink RFA Argus, and for various reasons our ability to defend ourselves on that day was kind of compromised, and pretty much the only way we could prevent a missile attack on the Argus was to put ourselves in between the missile and the Argus, and so that's what we did. And these two Iraqi MiGs got to within 30 seconds to a minute away from missile launch range, and a pair of Saudi Arabian Air Force F-15 Eagles shot one of them down. And the other one panicked, dropped his missiles and ran for home. So there was brown trousers all round on board HMS Brazen that day, but we got away with it. My next ship was HMS Coventry, another Type 22 frigate. Not the HMS Coventry that was lost in the Falklands. That was a Type 42 destroyer. The ship after that was HMS Southampton, Type 42 destroyer, then HMS Nottingham, another Type 42 destroyer, and then after that I spent a while ashore, and then I had HMS Manchester, and those were the ships that I served on. Interesting point to note, however, of all the ships that I served on, I forgot about HMS Newcastle. How could I forget HMS Newcastle? That one was before the Manchester. That was my second last ship. I spent 5 years on that ship, and it was fantastic. But how could I forget that one? Best ship I ever served on, without question. Just the ship's company, everything about that ship was fantastic. But interesting point to note about all the ships that I did serve on was, my first ship, HMS Brazen, after I left it, ran aground off the coast of Chile. My next ship, HMS Coventry. There had never been an HMS Coventry. I think the Coventry I was on was the 6th or 7th ship that bore that name. Up until that point, there had never been an HMS Coventry in the Royal Navy that hadn't either been sunk or captured by the enemy. So that's 2 out of 2, is looking pretty bad. My next ship, HMS Southampton. Before I joined it, HMS Southampton managed to wrap itself around the bows of a supertanker, and that caused a lot of damage. Nobody was seriously hurt though. My next ship, HMS Nottingham, after I left it, managed to run itself aground in a very, very publicised incident off Wolf Rock between Australia and New Zealand, causing £65 million worth of damage, and again, luckily, nobody seriously hurt. So when I joined HMS Newcastle, I was kind of, the ship's company were like, oh no, Jingles is joining quick. He's total bad news. Every ship he's had has run into disaster. Quick, everybody make sure your insurance policies are up to date. But nothing happened in the Newcastle. Nothing happened to the Manchester. So there you go. Those are the ships I've served on. IMX-141 wanted to know if I thought that there was a Russian bias towards the Russian tanks in World of Tanks, and this is always a popular question. I don't think there is. I can appreciate why people think it is, but here's the thing. Russian tanks in World of Tanks are pretty simple machines, and if you if you're a newbie to the game, or if you're just, not particularly good at driving tanks, which, isn't a bad thing, I think the Russian tanks are just easier to do reasonably well in if you're not that good at the game, because they're usually quite well armoured, they've got big powerful guns, and you don't have to worry so much about angling your armour the way you do in German tanks. You don't have to master the intricacies of managing your reload time the way you do in the French tanks. You don't have to consider positioning and where you're going to go on the battlefield to make advantage of getting hull down and frontal turret armour and so on the way that you do in certain American tanks. And it's just easier to derp around, really, not really caring so much about what's going on around you in Russian tanks than in any other nation, in my opinion. I could be wrong. It's just, you asked the question, that's my answer. You'll obviously do a lot better in a Russian tank if you worry about things like armour angling and positioning and so on and so on and so on. But it's not as necessary in a Russian tank as it is in other nations. Is that in itself an indication of Russian bias? I don't think so. I think another one of the things that people complain about is the fact that the Russian guns are not particularly accurate. They're big, powerful guns, but they couldn't hit the side of a barn from the inside. German guns, on the other hand, tend towards being more accurate, but not having as much alpha damage. So the problem exists with the game engine. The Big World game engine is what Wargaming have done with the Big World game engine is spectacular. I really, really respect what they've managed to do with the limitations of the game engine and the way they've adapted it. They've introduced physics and so on and so on and so on. But one of the hard limits that they can't get over is the size of the maps. And when you're playing on a map that's no more than 1 kilometre or 1.5 kilometres or whatever it is, it's certainly quite small in size. Especially when you start introducing things like cover and choke points and so on and so on and so on, the advantage tends to go towards the tanks with the guns that do lots of damage up close. And so there aren't that many maps in the game. There are some, but they're not that many, where, for example, the accuracy of German tank guns can really be felt. Let's not forget that, historically speaking, most Tigers were taking out enemy tanks from 1 kilometre away, and those enemy tanks had to get to within a couple of 100 metres to be able to hurt the Tigers. You can't really use that accuracy at range advantage in German tanks, not because the tanks are bad, but because the maps are so small. So that really is kind of the limiting factor, and it's always the Germans and the Russians and the bias and this and that and that and that. And I don't really think the bias exists. I think it's just you've got these certain characteristics of different nations. The Germans have got the accurate guns. The Russians have got the armour and the alpha damage. The French have got the autoloaders. The British have got the accuracy, firing on the move, crappy armour. In most cases, obviously some of them it's the complete opposite. Loads of armour, useless guns. The Americans have got the gun depression and the monster turret armour and so on and so on. And due to the size of the maps, the Germans tend to not be able to exploit their advantage of the accurate guns to the same degree that it's easy for other nations to exploit their advantages. Is that intentional bias? I don't think so. I think it's just due to the size of the maps and the fact that they have tried to give each nation their own distinct flavour. And unfortunately, it just means that, and again, I'm generalising here because there are certain German tanks that are fantastic brawlers. E75, I'm looking at you. But as a rule, just for the general flavour of each nation, the Russians do well, the Americans do well, the French are highly situational. Until you get maps with big, wide open views and the view range in the game is improved, and it's not going to happen because of the nature of the limitations of the game engine. The Germans are just not as able to take advantage of their advantage, which is the accuracy of their guns, as the other nations are able to take advantage of their advantage, and that's just down to the limitations of the game engine, I'm afraid. Final question of the day comes from JamesFan16, and he wants to know, in all seriousness, what do I prefer, apples or pears? And I'm with Eddie Izzard on this one. Apples all the way. Pears can just fuck off. Pears exist in one of two states, right? They're either rock hard or they're mush. right? And they just disintegrate as soon as you touch them. They're ripe for about 30 seconds. And they just, they sit there in the fruit bowl, and they don't ripen, wait for him to leave the room, okay, now ripen. And then you come back here and you think, oh, I think I'll have a pear, and you touch it, and oh, these pears are mush, man, and the pears are just sitting there going, so fuck pears. Pears can just fuck right off. And that brings us swiftly to the end of the first Mingles with Jingles Q&A video, although technically you could call it the second one, since Q&A with the Mighty Jingles was really the first. If you've got any questions you'd like answered in a future video, I'm going to try and do this once a week. Not sure which day of the week we're going to do it on. Tuesdays might be good, don't know, we'll see. Then ask your question in the comments, that's what it's for. Remember, check the video description for a link to my Facebook page and my live streaming schedule. Monday nights with Circumflexes, Thursday nights with Quickie Baby, Saturday nights with HB Origin. If you're not interested in live streaming or Facebook, then that's fine too. Don't check the links in the video description. Whatever floats your boat. Get those questions asked in the comments. I do read them all. I can't possibly answer all of them, however, but the most interesting and most popular questions stand a very good chance of me covering in the next video next week. As always, take care on that battlefield. Happy gaming, and I'll catch you next time.